It's my pleasure to introduce Mitch Mitchell from San Diego Gas and Electric. As our title sponsor, SDG&E has been a tremendous partner through the years with the South County EDC. And Mitch, as Vice President of State Governmental Affairs and External Affairs for San Diego Gas and Electric and Southern California Gas Company, Sempra Energy's related California utilities. Mitchell is responsible for state government affairs for both companies and oversees all external affairs activities for SDG&E. Mitchell holds a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Redlands. Mitchell currently serves on the board of directors for the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, San Diego Museum of Art, Voice of San Diego, the Sharp Hospital Board, and Jacobs Cushman Food Bank Advisory Board, and the New Children's Museum Advisory Board. Mitch, we welcome you and thank you for being part of this today.
Thank you very much for having me today, and for everybody who's joining in. What a treat this entire economic forum is for everybody involved, and it is a pleasure. As you heard, I'm Mitch Mitchell, and I work for San Diego Gas and Electric and Southern California Gas. And one of the things I always say as part of my intro is we are proud to be the utility provider for services from Fresno down to the Mexican border, gas mainly from Fresno down to the South Orange County area. But on the San Diego County and South Orange County, we're your electric provider. 45% of everything we deliver every day is coming from wind and solar. And that is something we're really proud of, and we're excited about the new technologies coming as we really work hard with the state of California, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the legislature to truly decarbonize the electric grid. And that is something that's really important right now as we look at the impacts of climate change. And I used to always crack a joke about, hey, if you enjoyed a warm shower, a hot shower this morning, and a warm meal last night, you're welcome. We're really pleased that we're able to provide that service. But these days, because of the COVID impacts and everyone working from home and kids in online learning, the job we do every day is essential. And we're working harder than ever to make sure that you have the services that you need. And so with that, I will introduce the person that you've all joined to hear from. And I will say this about the Lieutenant Governor, Eleni Kounalakis, my apologies, Lieutenant Governor. One of the things that is most amazing about her is her sense of calm. And I have been in the room with her a few times, listening to her speak and watching her interact with people, and her laugh and as she is answering questions. And it has really been fun to watch her. And I will admit that when she was running, I didn't know much about her, and I had to quickly research because I would see these commercials. But she has a fascinating background. She's a native Californian, and she is the first female elected to be Lieutenant Governor of the state of California. And an interesting fun fact, there are 58 counties, and she has visited all 58. And that is important because I want to say, I always remind people of the statistic. Governor Brown, when he ran for governor, he lost 32 of 58 counties the first time, and then he lost 30 of 58 counties the second time, but he still got elected governor. And visiting all 58 counties is truly quite an accomplishment, and so she is to be commended for that. She has had a wonderful career before becoming lieutenant governor. She was the ambassador to the Republic of Hungary, and she was named the ambassador at the age of 43 by President Barack Obama. And she also has a wonderful business background, as for years, she has 18 years in the development industry, and she actually has built several master plan communities. And in this day and age, when we talk a lot about housing and the crisis that we have, she actually has an understanding of what it means to deliver quality housing and how important it is. She is recognized as one of the region's most prominent businesswomen, and she has a significant passion for early childhood development. And as she actually served on the California First Five Commission, and the Lieutenant Governor, I actually was on that First Five audit board down in San Diego, so I knew about the importance of the work that the First Five was doing. So she graduated from Dartmouth College in 1989, earned a master's in business administration, or an MBA from UC Berkeley, and she is now doing what she does well. She is two teenage sons, and in her spare time, she's an important part of the California fabric as Lieutenant Governor. So without wasting any more time, I welcome the Lieutenant Governor, Eleni Kounalakis.
Mitch, thank you so much for that great introduction. It's great to see you again. Jim, it's wonderful to see you. And it's really terrific to be here virtually with so many leaders and business people and community advocates from the San Diego region. As Mitch said, I did go to all 58 counties, many times down to the San Diego region. My sister lives there. She's been there for about 20 years. And every time I go, I just marvel at what an incredibly beautiful place San Diego is, and just how warm and wonderful the community is. So what I thought I would do before we get into some Q&A with Jim is just go over a little bit about what the state's response has been doing and the state of affairs relative to the two unprecedented crises that our state is facing right now, the COVID-19 crisis and the economic outfall, and then of course the wildfire situation. So I had a chance to listen to part of the last panel, and what a distinguished group of experts talking about COVID, and in particular how it's affecting San Diego. I think the first thing I'd just like to note for everybody that I think it still is quite remarkable is that back in March, California was the first state in the country to issue a statewide stay-at-home order. And the reason I think it's important to recognize is that we have been science-based in our decision-making from the very beginning. And so experts for decades have been talking about the potential for a global pandemic. When it was clear that this is it, we wasted no time in elevating the voices of our public health officials. And even though the response was as dramatic as it was, telling 40 million people they needed to stay home unless they were essential workers, shutting down the 5th largest economy in the world, we did it. And that act saved tens of thousands of lives. If you go back to those early days when we saw horror scenes in New York and overseas in Italy and elsewhere of mobile refrigerated trucks as morgues and doctors making decisions over ventilators, we avoided that in this state, and that I think is quite important. And what we did is we also bought time. And in the time that people were washing their groceries and we didn't really know exactly how it communicated, we still don't know exactly, but we know a lot more. We bought time to do several really critical things. One, add capacity to our hospital system to prepare for a potential surge, get engaged in this race for PPE and other equipment like ventilators, which we did so successfully that not only were we able to work with our international partners, and my team worked very hard on this, but work with our international partners to acquire that PPE sufficient for California, but also that we were able to distribute that elsewhere in the United States and even down in the border regions where you all were then able to partner across the border and help support some of the collaboration that we were doing then early and continue to do with Mexico. The other thing is, of course, we have this extraordinary biotech industry. Again, San Diego has a piece of this. We house Gilead here. It's a California company which developed remdesivir. So far, one of the most, if not the most effective therapy being used in hospitals. It's bringing the mortality rate down. And then of course, our University of California system, I don't need to tell you, with UCSD, and also our private hospital system doing testing, research, and really engaging on the front lines of combating COVID. We had a summer cycle, so we dialed things open again, dialed them back closed, have created these, ever-changing but evolving positively system to help reopen safely. And in spite of that summer surge, we have been able to tamp it back down again to the point now where we have the lowest numbers that we've had in terms of cases, people in hospitals, and our overall positivity rate that we've had since the beginning. So in the summer, we peaked at about 8% positivity rate. We are back down under 3% positivity rate. I do want to note that Dr. Perez, I think is her name, the medical journalist who was on in the last panel, noted that it is disproportionately impacting people of color in the Latinx community. I heard what she said, which is that there are still too many members of the Latinx community who don't know where to go to be tested. I heard you, and I'm going to follow up on that because we have been doing everything possible in multiple languages to get the word out. We are testing more than 100,000 people per day, and we have a new protocol that will be coming online in the next few weeks to almost double the number of daily tests we're able to do. Okay, so that's COVID. And we'll talk a little bit more about the economic impact of that maybe in the Q&A, but obviously a lot to break down there. But really quickly, a couple words on our response to the wildfires. And, Mitch, we were talking about the San Diego fires in 2007. I remember this because my sister and her kids were evacuated. And I will never forget the sound of her voice talking about just the catastrophic devastation that she witnessed. And now, of course, we see that kind of thing, in every part of the state. And Mitch, you rightly noted just the difference in the climate that is resulting, these winds. So just to break it down a little bit, everyone, every year during wildfire season, California has thousands of wildfires. We've already had over 8,000 wildfires in California this season. The difference is 10, 15, 20 years ago, there's a wildfire in Sonoma, somebody sees it, picks up their phone and calls 911 because we didn't have these winds that would escalate these fires as quickly as they do now. We had the Santa Ana winds, and so there were always all eyes on Southern California because of the Santa Ana winds. Well, now they're everywhere. And after the 2007 fires, SDG&E did an incredible job in rethinking the grid, in breaking it up, and you've had tremendous success, I think it's safe to say, in those changes that you made to make your community safer. PG&E did not do the same thing. And so large parts of the state, particularly in Northern California, we're still grappling with that. Meanwhile, and again, San Diego plays a role because University UCSD is working on a camera technology system that's being implemented across the state so that instead of somebody calling up 911 saying, hey, there's a fire, we now are developing and implementing a system of camera technology to be able to see spot fires as early as possible. If we can get them out early through camera technology and pre-deployment of equipment, through better analysis of weather patterns to know where it's going to be the windiest, this will help us put the fires out before they become catastrophic. Because as we know, once they explode, it's very, very difficult to contain them. So this year, we also had something that wasn't unheard of before, but which escalated significantly: dry lightning strikes. So two of the largest fires up in Northern California were started by dry lightning strikes. I woke up in the middle of the night on the Saturday night about a month ago, and the sky was lit up with these lightning strikes that were not accompanied by rain. We've had the pine bark beetle infestation, which has killed off 100 million plus trees. So again, you get the idea, but this is where we are. We're going to continue to work to develop better technology to spot fires early, and we are going to continue to invest in the equipment and the firefighters to put these fires out before they become catastrophic. So that's where we are. I know we're going to have robust conversation, and I look forward to it. But these are two unprecedented challenges facing the state right now. And I wanted just to talk about them a little bit to all of you because while we do not have a magic wand, we are very forward leaning in our intention and our ability to meet the moment, as Governor Newsom often says.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Governor. That was amazing. Thank you for taking the time and joining us today. One thing before we get going, I just want to make sure we share a couple of housekeeping things. One, if you do have a question for the Lieutenant Governor, please click on the link to your right that says polls and then ask the question, and we will get to those in a moment. Additionally, if you're having any trouble with video or audio, right below the embedded screen on where you're viewing this, there's a link that says launch Zoom to use that separately. It'll pull it out of the embedded window and it'll speed it up a little bit for you. So thank you. But Lieutenant Governor, you've shared some amazing times with us over the last couple of months and everything going on. The state has responded rapidly as we go through all of these different stages. You know, the one thing that we were talking about earlier was you're on the Governor's Economic Recovery Task Force. What are you working on currently as we go into this recovery?
So it really, again, was a testament to our state that when COVID hit and the economy was the switch turned off, leaders from the business community and advocacy groups, chambers of commerce, stood up and said, we want to help. We want to be part of the economic recovery. What can we do? And originally the governor thought, well, we've got like 20 people. It turned out to be about 100 of the highest level volunteers I have ever seen assembled, everyone from Janet Yellen to Tim Cook to CEOs of Chipotle and Lockheed Martin and on and on. And so what we did is the governor asked Tom Steyer, a well-known businessman and climate activist, to get involved, to divide up these 100 people and figure out how can we use this talent. Governor was not interested in white papers. We wanted real-time results. So a couple of things that evolved fairly quickly, a couple of buckets. One is to work with this group to get support for helping to create the foundations of what reopening looks like. So protocols to get people back into the office if they couldn't work from home and they needed to be in place. You know, we have OSHA guidelines for a safe workspace, whether it's in your office or over at Chipotle or any other restaurant. And those evolve over many, many years of fine tuning. Suddenly we had to develop a whole new system of operating safely. And these businesses were extremely helpful in coming up with the protocols that probably many of you are operating under. The second thing that emerged as critically important was closing the digital divide, whether it was for telehealth, something that I worked on, whether it was for education and millions of school children having to work from home and not having bandwidth, not having high-speed internet, not having computer devices. So this group both raised funds through philanthropy in order to be able to get more laptops and iPads into the hands of our kids, but also worked with the PUC and other agencies to figure out what we do to get more hotspots and more connectivity. The third area that has been really largely a focus is the equity piece, because we know that people of color are being disproportionately affected. And so all of the many sort of sub-projects that have come up through the task force, an eye to equity has been critically important. And then finally, when we started the reopening and very quickly realized that because the case numbers rose in June and July, very quickly realized that when we said, okay, we're going to start reopening, too many people heard the coast is clear, everything's over, everything's fine, it's sunny. Donald Trump said as soon as summer comes, it's going to go away. Well, of course, as we now know, and I think he knows, this is highly contagious. And so our numbers spiked and we realized that we had a communications problem. So the task force mobilized and privately raised the money for the communications effort that many of you may have seen. You may not be the target of that messaging. A lot of the target was in the Central Valley, multiple languages, wear a mask, keep your distance, and wash your hands. So that we believe has now led to the conditions where now our state is reopening again. Counties are going from purple to red to orange. And I don't think there's any question that people are very, very well informed of these basic protocols of what you need to do in order to keep the spread from happening. Ooh, let me just say one more thing about the task force is that while they have been very involved, and again, I've been proud that the governor asked me to be part of it, with what we can do at the state level, very, very focused on a federal package. We know yesterday that the House passed the HEROES Act, or another version of the HEROES Act. I don't know now with Donald Trump getting COVID, what this means for getting a package through. But I just want everyone to know out there that wherever you are on the political spectrum, if we do not get more federal aid, our cities and our counties are going to really have a very, very hard time because the loss of tourism dollars, the loss of hotel tax dollars, the inability of the state to backfill it to the degree that's necessary. We need those federal dollars because they will prioritize helping our cities and counties. So it is no understatement to say that we at the state level and those who are working in local government are literally holding our breath for some additional support.
Now, obviously, funding coming out of this is going to be a challenge, and we've looked locally, and we're going to hear from our tourism authority shortly about the outlook on that. And yeah, tourism has obviously been a number one or two, depending upon the year, factor in our local economy and regional economy for that matter. So we stand with you on helping coordinate that. We had a follow-up question that came in from the audience on this very topic. They were seeing how can we help you reach out to the Hispanic community effectively, not only regarding COVID-19, but also that they continue with treatments of serious illness because people are tending to stay away from the hospitals out of fear of COVID.
Well, again, I think that this has been all hands on deck for us and working with the business community, working with chambers, working with regional groups. This is really communication is very important. And one of the things that we found is that too many businesses, particularly in critical sectors like agriculture and manufacturing, people were coming to work and they didn't have adequate PPE. They were working in closed quarters. Just because industry is essential does not mean that you cannot get sick in these environments. So helping us get the word out in the private sector where manufacturing and agriculture stopped, but making sure that the protocols are being followed is probably the single most important thing that you all can do, whether it's through broad-based communication or your person-to-person exchanges within the business sector to make sure that people are taking this seriously.
Thank you for that. Shifting focus a little bit, we've obviously being here in San Diego, we're very close to the border and working as an international region. We had some questions. The governor tapped you to be his representative for international affairs and trade. The past 2 years have been a roller coaster for the relationship between California and Mexico, as both sides of the border have dealt with the new USMCA, federal tariffs and the pandemic, just to name a few. What is your assessment of the California-Mexico relationship at this point? And what's your assessment of USMCA, even though it was launched during the pandemic here?
So thank you for that question. I know Paula Avila is going to be on your next panel, and Let me just start by saying that the work of leaders in San Diego in bilateral relations between California and Mexico has been very, very robust. And I think of her as the sort of unofficial ambassador from California to Mexico. Paula, I don't know if you're listening. You accept that moniker, but boy, you know, you and your leadership have been so incredibly important. So my assessment of the relationship with Mexico is that it is so deeply rooted and in decades of engagement. It's extremely strong. I had the opportunity to lead a delegation to Mexico, a trade mission the governor asked me to lead last year. Actually, was it last year? It was last year. It's a lost sense of time. And it was absolutely just great. And we took the opportunity to reaffirm our commitment as California's leadership to the relationship with Mexico as our single most important international relationship and partner. We share a significant border with businesses and trade and people-to-people exchanges. We share values, we share history, we share you know, in many ways, so much of our culture in California. So it was terrific, and I truly feel that both at the federal level and at the state level, with the governors of Baja and Baja California Sur and Governor Newsom starting up our Commission of the Californias again, that there is a mutual commitment to this relationship. So I feel it is very strong. In terms of USMCA, you know, again, this was, I think, actually a success, a Washington success story, because the first version of USMCA left a lot to be desired by some of us. It didn't address environmental issues. It didn't address the Tijuana River. It didn't address some of the labor issues that are important to us as Californians. And Speaker Pelosi really created a bipartisan solution with USMCA. So when those changes were made, we all enthusiastically supported it. And so I know the next panel is going to talk about, as a practical matter, what it's meant for trade. But I think that the committed allocation of funds by EPA to deal with the environmental challenges we have along the border is really something that, well, let me put it this way, I can't wait for those improvements to begin. But yeah, no, generally, Jim, the relationship is strong, and I just don't want to, in any way, I really want to impress upon everyone down there that at the state level, we know that the relationship with Mexico is strongest because of the foundation of the ongoing engagement between San Diego and Mexico.
That's great to hear, because we absolutely see it as one region in two countries, and we try and work as closely together on, you know, everything from logistics. You know, during this time, it's been hard to get product and people across the border, but working together to make sure that we can continue to operate a successful region together. But that was a great transition when you mentioned the EPA. So the Tijuana River is definitely something that, you know, is a discussion here quite often. One issue that's connected to the USMCA agreement is funding for water infrastructure and to address pollution across the US-Mexico border, as you mentioned. As part of the agreement, the money that was allocated, the $300 million, where do you see this going now that we actually have funding and some eyes on this program as well?
Well, I can tell you that the Newsom administration is very, very focused on getting these funds. You know, right after I became lieutenant governor, I had the opportunity to sit down with Mayor Dedina for coffee. And we had this conversation, and because I'd spent 18 years building master plan communities, you know, I understand water treatment. And he described to me an open sewer coming from Tijuana through California into the ocean. And it was astonishing to me because we absolutely do not build communities that way in California. So to hear that this was the reality of what was happening down there, I really, heard it as a clarion call. I understood exactly what he was talking about. And I said, listen, I want to help you guys. I want to raise the alarm of what's happening down here even more. So I went back up to Sacramento. I called the Cal EPA secretary. I called the natural resources and secretary, and we got together and I said, listen, you guys need to understand what's happening down there. We have got to prioritize this. So really, I sometimes think of myself in this bully pulpit of the lieutenant governor's office as being to really raise awareness, and it happened early on because of Serge's communication to me, and we really got to work. So there's an enormous amount of work to do. The money has to be allocated. The lead agencies need to be determined. We've got to get the design going, and we've got to start building this infrastructure. And by the way, to Serge and everybody who was part of the 60 Minutes piece, and if you haven't seen it, please do. We have a serious environmental challenge on our hand. We're making progress, but we still have work to do. And it's something that I raise regularly with interlocutors in Mexico, is that even with $300 million worth of improvements on our side, we cannot clean all of the water coming through from Tijuana when it's a heavy rain event. They have to improve and bring up their own water treatment in Tijuana to a higher standard than currently exists.
Agreed. And yes, thank you to Serge and the entire group in Imperial Beach. They've been an amazing spotlight on what's going on there and how important and crucial it is to the people immediately impacted as well. Staying with the environment and talking a little bit about that, just this past week, Governor Newsom signed the ambitious order to basically take us to zero emission vehicles by 2035. What do you think about it? And is California ready for something like that?
So, look, I was a United States ambassador, and I served in Central Europe at a time when the United States was really prioritizing energy diversity and independence for Europe from Russia. So I've had more than my share of engagement around the issue of energy security and climate change. And California is in a position where we can really lead on this. And the fact of the matter is that our goals for California are 2045 goals to be carbon neutral. That cannot happen if we don't do something about transportation. 41% of greenhouse gas emissions from the state of California come from our cars, our small cars, and not trucking, regular, everyday transportation and light utility vehicles. So if we don't do something about this, then we're not going to be able to meet those 2045 goals. And by the way, another 11% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from the refinement of fuel to fuel our cars. I was on a talk show over the weekend in New York City, and for them, it's really hard to imagine the idea that 15 years from now, all new cars that are sold in our state of California will be zero emission, and that is the executive order the governor signed. But when you're out here, it's much easier to believe. We have more than 500,000 ZEVs on the road already. My husband drives one, and I get around with Highway Patrol, CHP. So we're not there in that fleet yet, but we need to get there. But the fact of the matter is that We know how to do it in California. We have 34 companies here already engaged in the manufacturing of ZEVs, and our second largest export are zero emission vehicles because of Tesla. So we can see the future. And if we can literally reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in the state of California by targeting the fact that more than half of them right now come from combustion engine vehicles, this is the place where it has to be done. The technology is there. We need to get people to wrap their head around the idea that an all-electric vehicle is a perfectly acceptable and wonderful, frankly, in my opinion, way to get around. And we can do it. And if we can do this in California, then it can literally change the course of the world's ability to tackle reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in a way that can keep global warming down under 2%. And if anybody is still wondering if man-made activity has changed weather patterns, I just don't know what to say to you, because the science is so clear on this. Now, it doesn't mean that we're naive on our ability as human beings to counter the impacts of what we've already created. But I've spent time in our universities, I've spent time in the national laboratories that fall underneath the purview of the University of California. Scientists are looking at all kinds of ways for carbon capture and recapture the carbon that's already been emitted. We can do this. It really is a question of whether or not we're going to believe it and pursue it, or we're going to allow the fossil fuel industry to continue to tell us that it's not possible.
Wow, I appreciate that insight. We have a number of questions. Maybe we'll be able to invite you back to answer some of those, and we'll share them with you. Maybe you can give us some responses on those. But
I talk too much.
No, this is great. I really appreciate you joining us today. I wanted to give you a couple of moments to, share any thoughts you had. And I know one of the major topics in the discussion so far has been about the economy and what services may be impacted, looking at the state budget going forward. So if in your closing remarks, you might want to share some of that, that would be amazing.
Sure. Well, Jim, I'm enormously concerned, and I think everyone is concerned. We have almost 10 million people in California on unemployment insurance right now. We don't know when we're going to have a vaccine. We don't know when things are going to get back to normal. We hope that it will be by spring. We hope that our efforts around understanding the virus better will allow us to get back to as much normal as we possibly can. There are some sectors that have been totally devastated, like tourism. There are other sectors that weirdly are doing okay, like housing. So it is such an unprecedented moment in our economy that it is hard to really predict where we're going to be next month, the month after, January, March. I can tell you that individuals get through this extraordinarily challenging time.
We do want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for joining us today, and we will have her back soon and discuss things further. Thank you so much.
During these extraordinary times, SDG&E is here for you.
We are working 24/7 to keep the power flowing.
We're here to help if you can't pay your bill.
With bill relief through our CARE program.
We know energy is essential
to power phones and computers,
to cook meals
and warm baby bottles,
to keep hospitals up and running,
and stay connected.
We're all in this together.
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 Together.